We'll start just with the kind of mapping of the space with a few loose circles, letting the wobble be a little bit of a guide, and then expanding out from there to begin to connect across the page. So a little bit of a warm-up on that paper or scrap or this new page in the sketchbook. Taking a breath in, and then as you draw around roughly a circle, let it try to wobble a little bit. Just playing with allowing that wobble to come into the forming of the shape. We'll do a few of them where we're bringing a lot of attention and guidance to how our hand works the pencil around something there like a circle. This pencil away, the pen's a little darker. And just testing out a few different intensities of that wobble. It's just a light bumpiness, or maybe something really undulating, becoming more like a star, something like that. Just to feel out that space. If you've been moving counterclockwise, switch to clockwise, or vice versa. Something that disrupts that ideal circleness, but in a way that starts to fit in with how you can bring attention into how the hand is moving with the pen or pencil. Having that focus in the moment of action to direct that deformation to the ideal and keep our attention there. We don't lull ourselves too quickly just into the space of a circle or known shape, each one gaining a bit more uniqueness. As we expand to the larger drawing, we'll kind of look at ways of extending these circles out into the space. Just kind of some lines flicking from their edge, perhaps at key points of the inflection or outward curvature, reaching towards the neighbors or into the ambiguous territory around there. But a nice transition after the deliberate practice will come to a more fun, expressive one. Just to say, looking forward, we move to a larger, clean sheet of paper. Use a couple breaths to establish the space around me. Just get into my posture and position a little bit. Be ready for the next 20 minutes or so to be stable, to be comfortable. Make sure my feet are on the floor in a way that feels relaxed and won't introduce any tightness or distraction. And take that breath in. Let the hand look for a place to start on the page that feels right. Engage the eyes and begin again to draw the loose, wavy or bumpy circles, capturing some space inside and demarking this blank, open territory of the page. As a few of them gather tight or loose, near or far, they start to form spatial relationships in their proximity. And in each one, again, continuing to play and experiment a little with how that moving around circumference can have a bit of wobble and play to it. You can begin to adjust the size and intensity, just the proximity. Some larger ones, perhaps with smaller orbits little moons gathering around them. Or an even spread there on the page, giving that open space presence, removing its void, and bringing attention into each act of marking. You can take a few of the next shapes to really smooth it out and slow it down. Making sure we're taking a breath in to establish our space or place, and on the finding of a starting location, letting that breath drift out and aligning the speed of our movement. We feel that speed of breath exhalation. It may not complete the whole shape in one breath, but just to find some harmony in the speed. And once the breath is exhausted, to just allow it to continue at its own pace while you maintain that flow or motion on the page. We're coming into that space of our natural body's rhythm, the smoothing of our attention to the forming of that shape or mark. But checking in with the breath so that its time in the foreground can bring us connection and awareness, that our body and mind can maintain when it drifts to the background as we continue to draw. And spending the next few shapes noticing how that alignment with the breath and speed may change your control, intensity of that wobble to the shape. It could become more challenging to not have jerky motion as you move a little slower. And if you're feeling a struggle or a fighting of the instrument, maybe allow it to speed up a little bit, find that pace that moves smoothly with the breath as it flows out. The softening of that connection from the inside to the outside of our relationship to the page here. We tone down the deformation and the wobbles a little bit. Just recognize that, watch it, guide it if you feel inclined, or just to let it work itself out to whatever equilibrium may stand there on the page. And we'll do just a few more. The space contracting as more entities populate the area here. Density increasing, maybe evenly or variable. Just letting my eye track between each breath to a location that feels accepting of a new shape and letting it form there. Patterns may begin to emerge that you can engage with and guide as your presence and awareness within the space of the drawing and the action. Bring them to your forefront of attention. And it's okay if each unique little blob is just a moment picked at random with the attention focused on its individual expression, connecting that pacing of the body, pacing of the breath, pacing of motion. And as we move to a new layer of technique or anything here, feel free to continue with the wobbly circles. If you get full or end up on any one part of the exercise, jumping back and forth between them to cycle that attention can be helpful, kind of a counting or a rhythm of your own. What I begin to do now is to find locations on any one circle that attract the pen, maybe a dip or a bump, maybe a wobble or an inconsistency in my own hand, and let those lightly kind of flick or slip or slide out into the space. In your drawing, you can play or define, do they reach far or near? Does that motion of drawing out from the shape modify itself based on the space provided around each object? Small ones are light, extending just a little, large empty gaps between them, opportunities for reaching further. An exercise in our gradually expanding attention and awareness as we look into the space of the drawing that we've created. As we read a little around the consequence of that first moment of expression and action, and begin to connect it across that open territory with its neighbors. Begin to allow our eye and creative mind to enter into some of the decisions. Keep that lightness of stroke, the kind of wisp that may occasionally run errand or cross into another territory, but with just the gradual lifting off the page, fading out the area of influence and interface between each of these little moments. As we establish the technique, as we find our own motion and action of expression, whether it's light and feathered or maybe more smooth and gradual, we can begin to connect that technique not only with the visual elements of the page, but also with our own internal pacing, rhythm, to find some relaxation in the repetition of a found technique and letting it guide the drawing. Breathing in as you search for interface and letting it out with a nice breath in the same motion as you're drawing. For me, a light puff, just relax, almost a sigh, a breath, letting the whole body, shoulder, girdle, back, chest, fall into that expression of the line and of my breath. And finding a pacing there, perhaps a breath for each little extension or line is a bit too fast. Find a bit of hyperventilating. So there's going to be a balance. A breath in to find place and extension. Perhaps a couple breaths while you're still drawing. And then a return to that awareness of the breath in. Location and extension. A pacing of action and replenishment. Unlike four-legged animals and friends that must breathe with their motion, we have that decoupling, a space of play and flexibility in our rhythms of movement. And as different areas of the drawing begin to increase intensity of line, their collision of influence around each form, we may begin to see visual patterns or recognitions of shapes. We may just have little wobbly blobs reaching out. And for myself, I see either hills or depressions, perhaps little barnacles, volcanoes reaching up, the whole extending out into valleys or peaks between the shape, letting a little bit of our imagination, our eyes wandering, searching for pattern, to drift into the space, maybe as a guide or maybe just as a chance to observe and witness what comes to mind, like looking at clouds, with any technique that is generative more so than precompose. At some point, enough figure emerges on the paper to make a suggestion of things we've seen before. And that may influence us, or it can just drift by like the cloud. Interesting. A moment of imagination and fancy, forgotten as quickly as it comes. If something does stick, perhaps encourage an idea, we can, through our presence, through our awareness and intentionality that we practice in these exercises, pick up that influence and move with it, see where it might take us. Let it become the focus of our awareness. Or if it's creeping in, overriding, we have now a chance, an opportunity to practice breathing it away, letting it flow out, perhaps giving the eyes first a soft closing between strokes and breaths, so each one becomes a new opening and engagement with the paper. If it persists stronger, a deep closing bringing the eyes tight, letting the blood compress and flow, and in that blur of the reopening, seeing fresh what emerges on the territory. Many possible practices and techniques to enter in or detach from the influences of our visual metaphors, our memory and imagination, a thinking we saw. Not good or bad, just a presence, a property of our cognition. And as I begin to see something, I think I'll look at playing a little bit in the space between the shapes, maybe expressing some of the valley, lightly coming together of the figures in that in-between. Giving some recognition to the shape. But wherever you're seeing, wherever the drawing is taking you, giving it a few minutes here with some silence just to explore around the page, drift with the work, and have a little bit of fun drawing. Quiet and being with the self in an activity, whether that's drawing, some other meditation, running, an exercise, anything that brings that inward focus and time for thinking and reflection. And to begin to notice in your interface here with an action, creative expression, themes or interests, challenges, or new opportunities, and reflect on the layering, the slow, gradual build-up and emergence of ideas in a creative process. That we can begin something without necessarily knowing what it will come to, but perhaps with just a bit of direction, some small shapes, some light suggestion of form or pattern, and follow it. Let each move, play, explore, experiment through us, through the medium and the paper, until it begins to coalesce or gel into something that provides more intention to our engagement. And that not every project begins this way. Some have very strong initial parameters, intentions, or concepts, but that most projects should have a phase of this moment so that they have some room to find their own footing, so we have some room to play, think through our engagement. Do not be too bound for too long by our initial conception or preconception of the problem. To find ways of opening up in that creative space. To maybe just a little practice, a little reminder of what can come through that play and experimentation. As we come here to the final minute or so, feel free to continue drawing and exploring, or take a few breaths and just roll the shoulders and come back into your space. Maybe lean a little side to side, rock a little forward and back. Give everything a chance to reestablish from a moment of sitting and being in one position for a while, focused. Wiggle the toes and all the other extremities. And thank you for joining. Hope you have a good week. Be well. Thank you. Works is fun. Signing off here. Take care.